Russian leader Vladimir Putin said moments ago that Russia will increase its airstrikes on Ukraine in the coming days, weeks, and months. This comes as Ukraine says that Odessa on the Black Sea coast came under assault from unmanned Russian drones just hours into the new year. One person died, at least 9 were injured. New Year's Day was officially declared a day of mourning in Ukraine, where the death toll is climbing after the large-scale attacks from Russia a couple days ago. Search and rescue operations are still underway in Kyiv, where at least 28 people were killed, 30 injured. At least 53 people across Ukraine were killed in that large-scale attack. CNN's Claire Sebastian is watching this for us. Claire, what are you learning this morning?
Yeah, good morning, John. Look, I think even before we heard from President Putin, who was speaking at a military rehabilitation hospital this morning, it was pretty clear, given the events of the last few days, that Russia is stepping up the intensity of its air war with those missile and drone attacks on Friday. New Year's Eve saw, according to the Ukrainian Air Force, some 90 drones. They say was a record amount fired at Ukraine, of which they were able to avert 87 of them. But still, hearing it from Putin, saying it out loud, they are going to step up, he says, strikes on Ukraine's military installations and things like that. So it seems that the air war is now growing in importance, perhaps inevitable given the lack of movement on the front lines. So look, almost all regions of Ukraine on New Year's Eve facing an air alert. As I said, those 90 drones. These numbers are very significant. This may be a message not only to Ukraine, but also to the US, where, of course, Ukraine has now been promised the last package of military aid, unless, of course, Congress approves more funding, that Russia is willing and able to exploit the gaps in Ukraine's arsenal and exploit the gaps in its Western weapons supplies, John.
It's almost as Vladimir Putin is taunting the United States, as the Congress here seems to be deadlocked on whether to provide new aid to Ukraine. What are you hearing from Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky?
Yeah, so we had New Year's addresses both from Putin and Zelensky. Zelensky's was much longer, some 20 minutes, compared to the 3.5 or so that Putin spoke for. And he did what we've traditionally heard him do, which was really to try to accentuate the positive, to try to build up Ukrainian morale, which is being really tested at the moment, especially because of what is going on in Congress. So he talked about the diplomatic achievements over the years, the numbers of weapons packages that Ukraine has got, the decision by the EU to start negotiations towards EU membership for Ukraine. And he sort of talked about Ukrainian bravery and strength, said that Ukraine is going to get stronger. So look, he struck a resilient tone. He said that Ukraine is going to massively step up domestic production of weapons, but it is clear that Ukraine is going into the new year especially vulnerable. John?
All right, Claire Sebastian, thank you very much for that. And we are getting word now that Russia's bombardment, aerial bombardment of Ukraine continues, new airstrikes over Odessa. And as that's happening, we're hearing from Vladimir Putin as part of his annual holiday message, his New Year's address. And I just want to put a picture up on the screen so people can see what it looks like here, because when you look at this, you see something specific. Explain, Kim.
Well, last year he had troops behind him. It was a very patriotic message about continuing the war in Ukraine. I think this year what you see is that war has been normalized for the people of Russia. The outcry against it has largely been beaten silent. No mention of the hundreds of thousands of troops lost to death and injury in this fight. In a sense, he is implacably pressing forward as he also goes to another election in March, where he is pretty much the unchallenged candidate to become president once again. So war ahead, all systems go is his message, as his war machine also has stepped up the pace. And he's also secured supplies from countries like Iran. One of the major components of the aerial bombardment of Ukraine in the past few days has been Iranian-made drones. This, just as Ukraine has been fighting to get in supplies of basic ammunition to keep up its fight.
And Cedric, as we look at this, you know, the airstrikes in Odessa, but we've seen them in Kyiv, in Kharkiv, all the way over here in Lviv, also in central Ukraine, in Zaporizhia, other regions. How long could Russia keep this up for, Cedric?
Well, that's a really good question, John. I do think that we have underestimated the capacity of the Russians to withstand this. One of the things that we, in addition to what Kim mentioned, we have to look at, there's about an 800% increase in the trade in certain materials between China and Russia. And that material is predominantly war material that has been shipped into Russia from China and also North Korea. So the Russians can sustain this for some time. What can really stop them is some kind of industrial problem that they might have. Their production rates have increased for things like tanks and even airplanes and also munitions. So the big thing that we have to look for is some kind of impact that the sanctions are having on their arms production. And I think that impact is at the moment not as great as the West thought it would be. So he can keep this up for about another 6 months or so, I think.
Kim Dozier, Colonel Cedric Leighton, our thanks to both of you. Happy New Year.